everybody, how's it going? Welcome to Poetry Ireland's International Women's Day reading. We're here to celebrate women and have a bit of fun. And today, Poetry Ireland has provided this wonderful lineup of warrior women who are going to read some poems to help us celebrate International Women's Day in aid of Women's Aid. And those wonderful women poets are Ann Cullen and Afric Mackay and Chiamaka Enyi-Amadi, and Rosaleen McDonagh's poems will be read by Kathleen Lawrence and Siobhan Daffy, and myself, I'm Rachael Hegarty. So hang on to your knickers, have a good listen and celebrate women. The reason that we are here today is it's International Women's Day, and we are hoping to raise, along with Poetry Ireland, raise a few bob for Women's Aid. So if you do have a bit of money to spare, if you could look up womensaid.ie and throw them a few bob, because a lot of people are hurting, a lot of women and children need a few bob. Sadly, domestic violence has gone up. So International Women's Day has a wonderful history, and it was celebrated first in New York by the textile workers, the women workers, in 1907, and then it was celebrated again in 1917 by the Russian textile women workers. So I'm always fascinated by the fact that these women working in sewing factories got together and started this hoodie called International Women's Day. And with that in mind, I'm going to read a poem that came from watching my ma make communion dresses for me and my three sisters, and a few nieces and goddaughters and godchildren and granddaughters as well. So here we go. Communion. She yards out chiffon and sorts the paper pattern for me frock. The kitchen table's a feast of pins, shears and tailor's chalk. Ma steadies and measures me. She cuts the pattern on the bias. Watch her tread the bobbin with pursed lips, a sleight of hand and a careful lean into the machine. I'm lulled by her tap dance on the floor pedal, and how her swift hands and gymnastic fingers feed material under the hammering needle and steely singer's foot. Ma keeps her head down, but explains the work as she goes along. French seam, a double security for a tomboy like you. Applique a ribbon on cuffs to save delicate sleeves from pure filth. A white feather trim, like Noah's resting dove, warm on your neck. The lining of linen to keep you cool if the child of Prague glows. A blind hem and waist darts with give for growth. Come here, let me fit you. She zips, buttons, and ribbons the white dress. She tells me I'm a smashing beauty. That's me ma and all those textile workers working hard. So that's for all the women who are working today. So I grew up in Finglas, which was a great place to grow up in. I learned everything I needed to learn for poetry when somebody sang, everywhere we go, people always ask us who we are, and where do we come from, and I always tell them I'm from Finglas, mighty Finglas. That's really all I ever learned. I think that was the basics of life. When I went off to Boston and they told me about arts and humanity, I was like, oh yeah, I learned that in that song. All I needed to know was in that song about arts and humanities. Anyhow, the other parts of Finglas is that sadly domestic violence was an aspect of life on our estate. I think domestic violence is beyond class, but the thing about growing up in close quarters with other houses and terraces and flats is that you hear it easier, but it is an aspect of middle class lives, upper class lives. It's sadly an aspect of that goes beyond class and other social divides, race, religion, whatever you have in yourself. So I'll read this for any women who've had a hard time with domestic violence. Mrs. Murphy. The odd time there's a sighting of Mrs. M, head down, scrubbing out their front porch with a hard bristle brush. Crimson knuckled, elbow grease, arms reach, going 90. A bucket of rinse water. She starts off again, back into it. You wonder about the invisible dirt plaguing her doorstep. One Saturday, you see her washing windows, spy her pale pink basin of sudsy water and twists of scrunched up newspaper. You're at your hideout behind their garden wall. She says nothing. Her eyes are swollen purple, a gashed brow. Her hands shake. You leg it. Race the street shadows to your front gate. Clutch cold wrought iron in your fists. You wish you could ice her black eye. Dettol and plaster that gash. Mrs. M needs to see the state of your gaff with its manky porch and filthy windows. She should have a quiet word with your ma and her sisters. That's Mrs. Murphy. Her name wasn't Mrs. Murphy, but for the dignity of her privacy, I made her Mrs. Murphy. So my second book is called Mayday 94, and it's about the bombing on Talbot Street and Parnell Street and the back of Trinity there. So myself and my ma and our Daisy were in town on that day. I was 5.5. My ma saved us by throwing us into the pram and running when we got caught up in Talbot Street, but other families weren't. And 34 people died that day. And I wrote ballads for them as well as docu-poems. But I'm going to read one of the ballads for you. One of the families was from Finglas. They were the O'Brien family, and it was John O'Brien, who's aged 24, Anna O'Brien, aged 22, Jacqueline, their daughter, aged 17 months, and Anne-Marie, aged 5 months. So at the time, they were all living in Gardner Street, even though they were originally from Finglas, and they lived just around the corner from Talbot Street, but the whole entire family was killed in the Parnell Street bomb when that went off. So I wrote this ballad for Anna O'Brien. I love reading this at this time of year just because at this time it's about Finglas and missing Finglas. And I'm really missing Finglas now because it's outside of my 5K. That said, half of Finglas is meeting the other half of Finglas down in Glasnevin Cemetery because there's no guard in Ireland who's going to stop you when you say you're on your way to the cemetery. So anyhow, we'll continue on. Anna O'Brien. What I miss about Finglas are the trees by the Talca. The river made the valley and the valley gave us trees. When the priest in Gardner Street drones on, I mouth me prayers like the others, but really, I'd be back by the Talca, walking the trail of trees in me head. I hear me granny's voice, soft whisperings over the rattle of rosaries, and her telling me, trees never sin. She names off the trees and their markers, the willow with its weeping limbs, the ash and its papery bark, the oak's sturdy trunk and tiny toppers, and the hazel with its nuts for hungry gaps. When the time comes, I'll show our girls the markers for different kinds of trees. I'll take them to the elder, where me and John carved out our names when we was courting. They'll likely laugh at us, our ones, once young and carving love by the River Talca. So the last poem that I'm going to read today, hopefully will be coming from my third book. So my ma's got dementia and she's in a home now and we can't get in to see her. So I'll read this for her. I've written a book called Dancing with Memory because my ma loves dancing, and she kind of rocked all our worlds in the way that only a mother can. We adore her. But she's in the end stages now and her heart's only got 14% of it working. But when she turned 80, which was on the 25th of May, 2018, when she turned 80, I asked her, well, Ma, what do you think? How are you feeling about being 80? And she said, oh, I feel good. It's been a good life. It's been a lucky life. But if I had my time over again, I would have been a dancer. So I think about that, about women who maybe didn't get to be all they wanted to be in previous generations and how things are better this time around. And the 25th of May, 2018 was also a very significant day for Irish people and Irish women. We were all together for Yes. So here we have it. Dancing on the Dementia Ward, Together for Yes, 25th of May, 2018. Today, Ma shows little despondency. There's dancing on the Dementia Ward, Together for Yes, joy's ascendancy. We boogie, rock out our autonomy. Nurse, carer, patient, everybody scored. Today, Ma shows little despondency. We dance for no more backstreet lunacy, illegal pills or lonely trips abroad, together for yes, joy's ascendancy. Some shuffle while others sway wantonly. A young doctor discos and I'm floored. Today, Ma shows little despondency. One old couple tangos, a bit wobbly. Ma smiles, clasps her hand and thanks our sweet Lord, together for yes, joy's ascendancy. Wheelchairs join in this choreography. Dance beyond dementia, be restored. Today, Ma shows little despondency. Together for yes, joy's ascendancy. Thanks very much for listening to me. So today we are very blessed to have the wonderful Irish language poet and poet Aifric Mackay with us. So Aifric Mackay is the Irish language poetry editor for The Sting and Fly, Poetry Ireland Review, and Gorse. Like, she's got loads of feathers in her cap, she's deadly. So the Art Council of Ireland awarded her several bursaries in 2016, and she received the Oireachtas Prize for Poetry as well as that. Her collection Foreign News is the first with Gallery Press, and she's just gift. So Inish tá áthas don down, Orm mar tá Aifric Mackay an seo.
Gurmíle maith Rachel, Gurmíle maith and Liv. Thanks a million for the reading. God, I know people say tough shoes to follow, or that's not what they say, but some expression like that, you know what I mean? Hard act to follow. And this is my first time ever doing a reading on Zoom, so it's good to be doing it with brilliant people for something that matters. I'm just going to read 3 poems from my collection. Lehimas Gaelge Iadurdus, I'll read them in Irish first, and I'll read translations by David Wheatley. So I'll start with the last poem in the book. Just a love poem, a simple love poem. Ní Rachael an tain in iag a rubble, níor chraig einbach Kirkog, níor hiúil an lón fin gahar fór, an chahar fór níor dóch. An leiscéal a bach agam hain, gur brisach arm tan chuine. Ní mis is fard ver jalrub a dacha le squíle nodar. Ná tugtar mé mo oige, nar hegas an chalach ón chinna. Tá an amagam tasú as an nuair, dal a curryacht leis an town tilthe. The bird didn't fly tail first, or the hive lose a single drone. The lion didn't prowl below the city, and the city did not burn down. All I've got by way of excuse is being caught on the hop, who was never the first in line for when the penny dropped. Don't be so hard on my youth that I loved fire and not the fireplace. Time I started over and like Cuchulainn went to war with the waves. God, it's very strange reading on Zoom. I don't know if you're all used to it. It's weird. The poem I'm going to read now, you made me think of it with your own last poem. And it's called At Home. And it's about that question of how much life has changed for women and whether it has as much as we think. So I'll read it in Irish first. Sefale. Tá an éireann ban in Ishan. Elaine Schlachte de Ahar Elanon. Ceann na Lapan a fógart hí lauert amach. Nach laurofa amach. Is a chahan gomininic sa clinic omláin an le hennin bháin an chráithio nor a atan a béil le cealach. Eki sé tá agus níl amach vai. Tá ada glún hain ó lún fertil is tíobh sannaí deire an vantracht de flúchach glór a bhar le thuiristí an dartil. Ní chluisim hú John me dearach a mamó. An tiisce brostú dain thurasach is í a chuige súla. De cool na tinne mar a bheith parsa ann is subal tuiche. And the translation. At home. Now and in Ireland, a woman is reading to her sweetheart's bedridden father, the head on the sheets imploring her, speak out, won't you? Open your mouth. And spends whole days at the clinic with her lover's darling daughter when her lips swell with stings. She must and she must not walk out. However far she's come from her roots, she's off their stock in the end, women wise enough to drown their men's words with the sound of a tap. I can't hear you, John M., her granny used to say, running the water of purpose and slipping a wink to the female company by the fire, like a character in a rural soap. And I think I'll finish with this little poem and then I get to introduce the next poet, Rachael Hegarty. I should say, I hope I said that the translations are by the brilliant David Wheatley. I should say that. Good, I said it. Rachael Hegarty. Like the bleskin a couple, we chuine halle a dance tra, gamwin fima kala a soli bro, gamach na fali rar le kyo. Bechuskrach ani chuit na knofashin win lore, ni licking on scanra le mash, a queen gafanta im chor. The protecting word. Horses' skulls will be laid on dance hall corners once, to echo the clattering souls that the walls might burst with music. How inhibiting, my dear, that foundation of bones. I would not parole the fear I felt, but prayed it might stay close. That's that part. That's the hard part. This is the easy part. Chiamaka Enyi-Amadi is a writer, editor, performer, and arts facilitator. Her work is published in The Art of the Glimpse, 100 Irish short stories, that terrific anthology by Sinead Gleeson. And she herself is co-editor of Writing Home, the new Irish Poets anthology, published by Daedalus Press in 2019. Yeah.
Thank you for having me for this wonderful program for International Women's Day. So I will begin with the Writing Home New Irish Poets anthology that I co-edited with Pat Lauren of Native Press. This poem is called How, and it is about a very feminine experience, people who bleed, and how complicated that time can be, emotionally but also physically. This poem is called How. The harmony of skin on skin, of flesh meeting, in hunger, in wonder, in ra, in sweat, tears, blood, between my legs too soon, painting your cotton sheets crimson. While I sleep, it sips through some old part of me steadily leaving, this time too soon. I am at a loss, I have no tool to plug this sudden drip. This time, I do my one good trick. Turn a sight of desire into a pit of despair and bury myself in shame and stained sheets. You wake and reach for me. The harmony of skin on skin, of flesh meeting in hunger, in wonder, in ra, you feel the sheets wet, my body in retreat. You spring up, grabbing towels, maneuver me half against my will. Wrapping thick white towels around my waist and between my legs, I have no choice. I give in, allow my body take center stage, announce my pain out loud, and you reach for me again. The harmony of skin on skin, my body in distress. The second poem that I read from the anthology is called Women and Other Flowers. It is about my experience as a child immigrating with my family to Ireland. Once upon a time, a little girl turns 11 and is transformed into a new EU citizen. But then she spends her first Irish winter desperate, weeping, her mother shrouding her in a floral duvet, her stock, thin, pre-teen body pressed against the radiator in the hallway of their new house all one frosty night. Shivering, she clings to its heat, wheezing, a young willow battered by the wind, needing shelter in an arc of sunshine. Ribs aching against metal ridges, her soft breathing intertwines with the whistling of something sinister trapped within. A symphony of shared corporeal struggle, attempts at settling, at staying alive. And sentimentality does not suit perennial beings. There are seasons for such morbid things. And ever after, a delicate time spent in the trauma of self-renewal, preparing to be whole again. The next poem that I will read is from the Irish University Review, which I was invited to contribute to by the wonderful Emily Pine. And along with one of my favorite collaborators, Emma Penny, Dr. Emma Penny, we worked on a really great essay called Amplifying Us, New Writing in Ireland. I would suggest that you read it on the website. It's a great meditation on the need for diversity in Irish literary spaces. This is a poem that I contributed along with the essay. It is called Where Are You Really From? I was born in Echo, on ancestral Yoruba land, or Lagos for those in the diaspora or unfamiliar with the Niger area. I took my first breath as a foreigner in a multi-ethnic megacity, a fortified cradle of all humanity. Hundreds flock there for fairer weather from all corners far and near each year. The city's fertile banks sprout over 500 lingua francas, though our tongues drown under waves of imperial imposition. It's old news, I know, yet it stings like alcohol in a fresh wound, like teeth being pulled, each new syllable of the Queen's English stitched into memory by one too many lashes of the English vice. I hail from the east, kingdom of the Igbos. The Awasas built empires in northern Nigeria. The Yorubas are indigenous to the west and made Lagos the center of excellence. Growing up in the beating heart of Nigeria, in a bustling community of young and old, well accustomed to decay as we were to growth. At Eid or Christmas, our small streets would swell with the sound of happy children, running around with round bellies, chickens crowing, crows cackling, picking at the festive remains of our communal feast the night before. Our gutters overflowed with the remains of livestock, the blood of cows, chickens, goats curdling into a thick indigo sludge. The sickly sweet stench drifting through the breeze, proof of the intangible architecture of communal values. Each pulse pulls us closer together in celebration. Each murmur merged our miseries into a shared condition, stirring our stories into a melting pot of madness, miracles, and meritocracy. Most parents want the best for their children, but in our homes, we were taught to be the best, to prove our worth, to use our brain, and weighed down by the expectation that only we would and must elevate our families from poverty. In our homes, our mothers would mouth the biblical mantra, spare the rod, spoil the child. At school, we were slaves to teachers who'd mastered the art of humiliation. When each day is full of frustration, it is harder to draw the line between scolding and sadism. Stay in your lane if you don't want to chop cane. Shut your mouth, face your book. Don't you know Nigeria's future depends on you? Lagos is both heat rashes and rain-soaked uniforms. Lagos is sleeping through mile-long traffic jams. Go slow every Sunday as hundreds of families flock towards the promised land in search of salvation, or at least the promise of sweet bread to soothe our hungry bellies. Lagos is talcum powder caked skin and caramel mud baking beneath the scorching rays of a cloudless sky. We soaked up the carnage after each April downpour, when the roads would turn into rivers that rivaled the Niger, and beige water would climb all the way up to our chest, threatening to swallow us whole as we trudged home from school. Lagos is a city of chameleons, of bus conductor every other day and choir master every Sunday without fail, of money chasers and culture creators, of music makers and world changers, where nothing is constant except change and daily hustle is the name of the game. Lagos takes on the shape of whatever it feels like at any time. It borrows land from the sea with no budget to pay it back. Still, it took me by surprise when I found out that the house I spent the first 8 years of my life coloring the beige cement walls with crayons I hid beneath my pillow for safekeeping, in disregard of the rules my parents enacted to control the boundless chaos of 3 youngsters running up and down the dilapidated one-story building we called home at the time, had been swallowed up by a modest mansion. I approached the scene by bird's-eye view, peering down the blurred lens of Google Earth, as I marveled at the massive green roof and the deep red and white mosaic stones of the outer walls. The new house stood unapologetic and unconsoling in the face of my fierce and necessary nostalgia, as if to remind me of the city's reality, as if to say, home is never where you last left it. Home is where you last felt like it. Thank you. Thank you for having me once again. This has been really nourishing to spend time with just talented writers and poets and performers such as yourselves. The next speaker and performer will be Siobhan Daffy. Siobhan Daffy is a performance poet and author based in the Dublin Mountains. She loves the rhythm and music of poetry.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Chiamaka. I'm really enjoying the book of stories. I was reading your short story in The Art of the Glimpse just 2 or 3 nights ago in bed. It's great, really loved it. It's a terrific collection. There's so many women in it. I just love it, Sinead Gleason's collection. It's so nourishing. Women I'd never heard of, women who are long gone, and their short stories in this collection. So yeah, highly recommend. I was just trying to really tune into today this morning, and I've been reading Gloria Steinem, The Truth Will Set You Free, but first it will piss you off. And there's just this great quote, and I thought, I needed to read this to tune into International Women's Day and Women's Aid. And she's speaking about a study that was done. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a chainsaw in the fields behind me that has just started up. It's talking about a study about violence that was conducted in 100 nations around the world, and basically the outcome was the discovery that the single biggest determinant of whether a nation would be violent, both in its own streets and in military violence against another country, was domestic violence in the home. More than poverty, access to natural resources, religion, or even degree of democracy, they found that violence against females was the indicator and normalizer of all other violence. I just, and it's so moving to read that and to know that that's been such an issue during the pandemic for so many women. I've been reading about it. I mean, we're all so removed, and yet I feel so connected when I read something like that, and I read, the headlines and the reporting to Women Aid and the other charities about women looking for refuge. So, and that led me on to thinking about vulnerability and as women, and that led me on to a poem that I thought I'll share, which is really about the utmost of vulnerability and the utmost of strength, which is where we find ourselves a lot, I feel, as women, speaking for myself anyway, the great vulnerability and the great strength. And this poem is called Surrender. I have a little thumb piano with me as well. Surrender. So this poem is dedicated to all women giving birth to young people or to themselves. Surrender. I remember the trembling, squatting down. There was nothing I could control or hold on to. The very notion of a child had left my mind, nothing but my animal body, heaving and sweating, doing the thing all by itself. It was a shock to find myself so gone and shivering in the wake of it. Then she was in my arms, and Susan, the midwife, said, "Look, see what you've got." And I touched her vernixed, new-made skin, pushed aside the cord, and said, "It's a little girl." It's so strange. I love the claps. So I'm just going to read one more poem. This is called A May Morning. And this is dedicated to all women in situations of conflict at the moment. Wherever they may be, whether that's in their own home or, you know, in so many of the places where they're really struggling at the moment. It's so hard sometimes to pin down exactly what violence is. I mean, violence can be a look, violence can be an atmosphere, violence can be a sudden movement, but peace is something so simple. And I think all any of us ever want is that feeling of being able to completely relax and to watch children grow up. So this is called A May Morning. Some days when I walk the children to school or hang out laundry, when I bend to water peas or salad, to pull up weeds, I think, this is it. This is peace. Thrushes singing in the blackthorn, children's shoes strewn in the porch, a door banging as they run in and out. The mindless clearing and cleaning, this sweet domestic I would fight against. This is it. What thousands seek every day, crossing borders with just the clothes on their backs, their ears still craning for the whine of a shell, the chop, chop of helicopter blades. This is what they have died for. Crossing icy mountains by nightfall, or ocean waters in a tiny boat. This security, this God-like quiet with only the day ahead. The hold of a child's hand on a May morning, a thin mist down in the valley, houses poking through, a chimney stack, orderly slates on a roof, a loose hen pecking the ditch nearby, sheep bleating all around. This is it. Thanks, ladies.
Thanks so much, Siobhan. That was lovely. I feel kind of hypnotized now. So it's absolutely gorgeous to hear you all. In case anybody doesn't know the wild and wonderful poet from Finglas, she was supposed to wait for me to introduce her, but she took flight. And so that was Rachael Hegarty, just in case you didn't know. And thank you to our next guest for her patience, because she is not a mad poet like the rest here. Last year, Rosaleen McDonagh, our great friend, brought the house down with her poem, I'm Not a Settled Woman. And we were all in Poetry Ireland together. It was a great occasion. And please God, we'll be there again, or please whatever goddess is out there, we'll be there again next year. Rosaleen is an activist, playwright, the first traveller to be elected to Aistona. And she worked for 10 years with the Pavy Point in the violence against women area. So we're very sorry to say that Rosaleen is recovering. Well, we're happy to say she's recovering from COVID. We're sorry she's not with us today. And we send her all our womanly healing vibes and hope that she feels much better soon. But we're very lucky to have her friend Kathleen Lawrence with us today, representing Rosaleen. And Kathleen is an education support worker with the Northside Partnership, and she has a master's in human rights from UCD, and she took part in the Washington Ireland programme in 2017, and she's also a Minker or an Irish traveller. So with my very small amount of gammon, I'll say grazie to you, Kathleen.
Thanks very much. So thank you again for having me. And as you said, Rosaleen is a very good friend of mine, and I'm very honoured to be able to read her poem. Just before I do that, I just want to say that the theme today is actually very close to my heart in regard to domestic violence. As someone who has survived a domestic violence situation myself over 8 years, it's one of the hardest things someone might ever have to do, to actually get up and leave. But as I can proudly say that that is 9 years ago at this stage when I made the step to leave, and I am thriving since then. So I just want to say to anyone who might ever need that courage, that it is the hardest thing you'll ever do, but the first breath that you take once you've left that situation is that sense of peace. That I just listened to that poem, and that honest to God, the relief and the peace from that is something that is irreplaceable. So if anyone, whoever, as said, needs that courage to leave or to contact the likes of Women's Aid, or if anyone is watching who feels like they're able to give a bit of money to that would be a great thing. So I shall now read Rosaleen's poem, I Am Not Your Knacker. Part 1, Origin. The allegory, aligned in the ether, where slang conspires to maim, locked expulsion of vileness, in the company of derided expressions, gathering momentum, a colloquialism, a description charged with derogatory tones, abo, hori maori, knacker. Intuitively knowing danger, its velocity in whispered tones, tinker, the owl description, the earlier word, the correlation with the world of horses, the world of slaughter, where the banjaxed are relegated to redundancy. Itinerant, the idiom, ethnic cleansing, torture at a slow pace, undertones and brutalities, ridicule, cruel denigration, igniting language. We oscillate in and out at the historian's pleasure, an onlooker who narrates our shadowy presence, lens tapered and rigid, our invisibility, an unmarked spectre, a legacy of debris. Part 2, dehumanization. Our ineptness, failure to interpret your instruction, negotiating cultural constructs, language and imagery, the obstinate child that refuses to be infantilized, impinges on our lives, a casual part of being Irish, a dividend to sustain, a depository of shame, lacks reference, pending permission. Our people struggling with ways to articulate an old provocation. The schoolyard, a kick, a shove, a thump, consistent, predictable, pushing us to the edge of a road, a sentence, a cue. My kind, the task, assimilation, evaporate or absorb. Baldwin's response, I am not an N, I am a man. The purging of our ethnicity, rewritten with banality. A legacy of misfits, this ascription, intergenerational, the nuisance which the historian cannot account for. Our algorithms romanticized, short of complexity. Through the lingering settled gaze, the impasse is propelled, neglecting to claim or embrace. Our suicides, a traveller epithet. Forensically examining our authenticity, misappropriation, infraction and thereby reflection. Assign the badge of degenerate, savage and dangerous. The knacker, the vernacular, modified to suit a certain occasion or milieu, a euphemism, subtlety, Irish style. This axiom is objectification, internalized oppression, seeps from our genes, subordination is the framing. The grip on our young, disassociating us from each other, wanting the virtuous, one voice, one image, an accent, an emblem. Your task to reduce, essentialize, deciding who is worthy, language of winners or losers. Your attention is pernicious. Your warning is always inferred in what you can give, what you can take. Your gaze wanting the exotic, cliches and stereotypes. Your myths grind me to a shadow, caricaturing for comedy while cancelling our culture. My home a health hazard, living in the leftovers. Your rejection is toxic, the kernel of infamy. Lying restlessly in a residue, an injured psyche. The cost of losing our dignity requires losing our lives. Part 3, Fight Back. 2017, recognition, official ethnic status. This new embrace is choking, the knot, family, heritage, identity. The beat, the rhythm of our culture belongs with our children. Armoured with pride, their tempo and dance is one of resilience. As Clifton puts it, come celebrate with me. Something has tried to kill me and has failed. Under constant surveillance, the juxtaposed, ambiguous prediction. Venerable, venerated and despised. Honourable artefacts, controversy and conflict. Requires introspection, asymmetrically buckling, remaining obscure, a parody, illuminated, curiosity versus accuracy. Your silent fear, contagion, contamination, finally diminished. The active protagonist, our retort is to defy, our identity a mere footnote. Fragments of both narratives crisscross, resistance and representation, the pendulum that swings and clashes. Our strength, our voice, our integrity, our survival, our motivation. Part 4, the personal. The tropes of many cohorts, my gauzy ghost plagues me. The constant referral infers inferiority, speechless, motionless, damaged, all-consuming, scabs of neglect, delicate and fragile, in desperate need of a swig of adrenaline, riddled with rage, gushing through me, wordless. A body profiled, policed and politicized. This colonized body, female, traveller, disabled. Your dark Rosaleen, a dirge, a partisan parable, a directive echoes and bounces, a rendition of our Renaissance. The proximity of separate lives, all engulfing a metaphor, holds no vagueness, the edge of town next to a landfill. Acronyms and actions, NIMBY, the assault, the intent. The rhetorical silence, the exhaustion attached. Me, Ireland's subservient daughter. Regularly lectured on the delicacies of etymology, intrinsically knowing the connotation, while leaving our mother's wombs, context and history, polarized, intractable, presentation, As the Lord said, we were never meant to survive. The traveller evaporates, the knacker remains.
Wow, that was powerful, Kathleen. You read that powerfully. Brilliant.
Thank you very much. I can't take credit for the absolutely brilliant poem that Rosaleen's written.
It's fabulous. That's fabulous. Thank you so much for doing that. I can't believe I was trying to give you some tips for reading. You're better than myself at doing it, that's for sure. Thank you, Kathleen. That was really wonderful. I'm going to finish up myself.
Will I introduce you?
There you go on, so.
Look, you don't want to be Scarlett and looking like a Muppet introducing yourself, so you deserve the woo, 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 woo. So there they are. The girls are out to the front and I will introduce. So we are very, very lucky to have Ann Cullen as the poet in residence at Poetry Ireland and all the gang at Poetry Ireland. But today, Ann Cullen is going to read some of her poems to help us celebrate Women's Day, International Women's Day. So Ann Cullen is the poet in residence at Poetry Ireland. She was awarded loads of stuff and loads of prizes. She has 3 collections of poetry and she has 3 children's books as well. And she has kept lots and lots of people going with her wonderful poetry prompts through this whole pandemic. So she's very deadly. Ann Cullen.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. And thanks to you all for taking part. It was just really, really lovely to hear everybody. And Kathleen, thank you for sharing your story with us as well. And I'm going to read this poem for you because I wrote it for an art exhibition called Sanctuary that was run by Nikki Hayden, a wonderful artist who works in the area near Poetry Ireland. And so this is just called Sanctuary. There is a place where you're safe from the chase, where you know whoever is it cannot go, where you hear the feet batter past, your heart slams slow, slow, where you've skipped out on death, can stop running, catch your breath. The locked door feels good. Uncross your fingers, you're touching wood. It feels like a game again, and you've reached home, base, den. That's just a simple little poem. And this is a poem for women who are struggling with their partner's depression. I won't say too much about that, but we've all probably been there at some stage. A lot of women are doing it. It's a little sonnet, and it's just called Subsidence. I did not know the weight of a heart could sink a house, but where the front door stood, only the lintel shows above ground now. Today, I squeezed onto the landing floor, climbed down to where you slump in the cellar. But we had no cellar. Here at the countertops, we drank the sun for years with coloured straws bent to savour the last drops. Soon I'll have to take the children to the attic to breathe some light. There the sun will set in the window and the houses opposite reflect the morning. When the rays get to your heart, my love, they're bound to shift it. I'd carry you up myself if I could lift it. So that's Subsidence. I'm going to finish with a song that I wrote. I've been writing some poems about the North Inner City Folklore Project stuff collected by Terry Fagan. And one of the things is a messenger pouch that belonged to Molly O'Reilly. She was one of the youngest women involved in the 1916 Rising. And she was radicalised really young. She went to Liberty Hall to learn Irish dancing and she heard James Connolly speaking, and that was it. And she's from Gardiner Street, so she's very local to Poetry Ireland area as well. So if you can forgive my not great singing, I'm going to sing Messenger Belt. Now, just get the guitar ready here. I was sent to learn dancing at Liberty Hall, but Jim Connolly's talk sent me reeling, 'cause my home stomping ground of the tenement sprawl needed more than mere towing and healing. Now they ask who's the bride who's so light on her feet, whose dancing rings round us whenever we meet. I'm Molly O'Reilly from Gardiner Street. If anyone asks who goes there, die 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 die. Jim gave me the gift of a messenger pouch on a brown leather belt with a buckle, 'cause he saw at the sidestep that I was no slouch, and to union and crown I'd not truckle. With the belt on my hip I could run hell for leather. God knows our poor army was cobbled together. But I gave the peelers a bit of old blether if ever they asked who goes there. Die 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 die. A soup kitchen queen by the age of 13, a firebrand with rifles to smuggle, unfurling the flag, the uncrowned harp and green, on the eve of the Easter week struggle. Then from pillar to post as bombs smoked the air, I ran rebel notes on a wing and a prayer. I'm Molly O'Reilly, the devil may care if anyone asks who goes there. Yes, I'm Molly O'Reilly, the Summerhill hare, if anyone asks who goes there. Die 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 die. Who goes there? So that's Molly. And just to say thanks everybody again. Thank you Aifric and Rachael, Chiamaka, Kathleen and Rosaleen in absentia, and Siobhan. And thanks to Poetry Ireland. And please donate to Women's Aid if you've any few spare bob at all.